Weather prognosticator Chad Merrill here with a look at the weather forecast through not only Independence Day but also the end of July. And on this 23rd of June, a cold front is moving across the Ohio Valley, and that will trigger scattered showers and thunderstorms across much of the interior mid-Atlantic through the evening hours. Well, here's just a good idea of how the sun moves from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere as we go throughout the year. So take a look at this nice animation, and notice we start with August with the sun's most direct rays in the northern hemisphere, and watch what happens as we go through time. Notice how the sun's rays migrate here from northern hemisphere to southern hemisphere to northern hemisphere back to the southern hemisphere as we go. And that's exactly why there's more daylight in the summer, because the sun's rays are focused in the northern hemisphere. But once we get into December, unless you're in the southern hemisphere, the daylight is shorter. All right, well, those of you who were following the podcast last week, I talked about the annular eclipse, and that's the moon's shadow passing over Eastern Asia. And here's the outcome of that. Watch the moon's shadow go from west to east as the sunset line moves from east to west. So those in Southeast Asia got to experience that brief period of darkness on June 21st. All right, let's talk about what's going on weather-wise. There was a microburst that hit Elizabeth, Pennsylvania on Wednesday, June 10th. This is from a friend of mine in the Elizabeth area, which is near Pittsburgh, and widespread tree destruction. The trees were flattened in this very small section, about a 2.5 mile section in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. So microbursts are most common in the summertime, with very significant thunderstorms that extend all the way up to jet stream level. What you get is a cold rush of air that comes down. It's associated with very strong winds and ample amounts of rain that push to the ground. And as the rain and wind push to the ground, it spreads out, and you get widespread damage just in a 2.5 mile radius. And here's the atmospheric setup for a microburst. A lot of low-level moisture in the first 5,000 feet of the atmosphere, then a very strong dry pocket once you get up to 5,000 to 10,000 feet. But these are the wind barbs indicating 30 to 50 knot winds all the way up through jet stream level. And the setup in Pittsburgh on June 10th was very similar, where the temperature and dew point line here close together, meaning there was some moisture here at the surface, which is this area right here that I'm highlighting, but very dry air as you got towards the jet stream level. And these are the winds, which increased from 30 knots to 50 knots through the atmosphere. So these microbursts can happen June, July, and August, but in a very small area, but do produce destruction. Rainfall wise, so far this month along and north of Interstate 80 has been dry, 1 to 2 inches below average, but along the turnpike and farther south, it's been a wet June so far, with the exception of the Laurel Highlands and the I-81 corridor between Chambersburg and Hagerstown, Maryland. Well, going forward, here's what we see. First of all, we have the cold front that is moving through Tuesday afternoon. This will be followed by a trough that moves in. The jet streams dipping to the south, so some cooler Canadian air across the Midwest moves in our direction. And that will be for a couple of days that we will have some relief. Here's just an indication of the relief that we will have. The amount of moisture in the atmosphere across the Midwest on Tuesday behind the front, 0.85 inches, which falls in the lower part of the median range for this time in June, so the air will be markedly less humid going through Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We also have Sahara dust that's pushing across the Caribbean. I mentioned it in last week's podcast, limiting visibility significantly across the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. And this dust is actually working its way northward. And believe it or not, once we get through late this weekend and early next week, this particular dust plume is going to make its way into the mid-Atlantic. The yellows indicate the greatest concentration, which will likely stay just to the south across southern Virginia and the Carolinas. But what will that mean for our weather with this bit of dust that will move through parts of the mid-Atlantic? Well, first of all, here are the significant weather days through mid-July, and some of that does include what's going to happen with the dust. First of all, on the 28th, we will have a cold front come through, scattered showers and thunderstorms, the potential for severe weather along and north of Interstate 80. Sunday night through Tuesday, do expect a few colorful sunrise and sunsets due to that ash or that dust in the atmosphere, and you'll get some of those reds and yellows that will be magnified because of the dust. So if you take a picture of the sunrise or sunset during this particular time, please submit it to us. We will put it on the next podcast. On the 4th of July, Independence Day, looking for isolated thunderstorms between 2:30 and 6 p.m. and then dry weather. No weather concerns for fireworks. Should they occur, many cancel because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Monday the 5th, sunny and warm. Sunday the 12th, thunderstorms. And Monday, July 20th, thunderstorms with flash flooding possible. Now, we do have a lunar eclipse coming up, the penumbral lunar eclipse. The moon passes through the Earth's shadow, and during this time, the moon will darken a little bit, but not completely. It's one of those lunar eclipses where you have to look very closely to see some shadowing effects on the moon or darkening. And the time it will occur, 11:07 p.m. for the Mid-Atlantic. And as you can see, most of the eastern United States and the central United States will see this as well. So here's basically what you're going to see with this particular eclipse. The moon will darken a little bit on its northern fringe. Otherwise, there won't be too much to observe. The full moon being here around this time, so just the northern part of the moon will be darkened. And here's basically the geometry of how eclipse forms. You have the sun's rays hitting one side of the Earth, and then the moon being in a bit of a shadow, and that shadowing is the little bit of darkness that you see on the periphery of the moon. So that's another event that you can tune into. Go away from city lights to see it, of course. Go to almanack.com to order your 2020 Almanac, or sign up for Friends of the Almanac in digital format. Have a great day.